I'm going to tackle how well-designed UX can improve monetization, UA, and retention. So here's a little bit about me. I spent 6 years in games. I've done 6 years, obviously, in web and apps. I'm a split producer in UX. I did my time in Chilingo. I was kind of like part of the freemium game and paid game Rush. And I've been freelance 3 years. And I've shipped, as a producer / UX, about 100 projects in my time. Most of those when I was part of that big, prolific publisher. So I'm going to cover 2 things. The process, so how to get to success. Wow, nearly said they said a bad word there. How to get to success. And then I'm going to look at some analysis with the HUD, the tutorial, and the store. The process is actually quite key. So in both games and apps, you generally do a persona in the beginning. This can come out of your prototypes. It's basically who is your target. So you can do this via workshopping. You can have many of these. So you could have a core game, but maybe it attract a slight mid-core audience. And then you can create stories around your personas. And this will basically affect how you approach the UX. It can also feed into your pitch decks. Basically, if you're pitching for investment and all the rest of it, you can bring in UX very early into the process. This is also part of the problem solving and research point. You may have a PO or a producer come at you saying, the game loop is short, so we need to get players through the store with as little friction as possible. Show an advert and view the leaderboards and do everything but the kitchen sink. And as a UXer, you've got to make that choice of what you're actually going to do. Thinking of it in kind of timeline, think of it in a lot of different ways, which I'll come to in a bit. But what I mean by friction, because a few people will probably be thinking, what is friction? It's basically the obstacles to reaching a goal. Everything is borrowed. I've listened to a few of these presentations today, and you generally are cross-pollinating certain mechanics with others. So, what I would suggest at that point is if you've got a direct competitor out there, map out their journeys, physically print them, and put them up on the walls. There's nothing like having like an old school kind of paper trail of journeys up on the walls, because then you can look for pain points as a team, and there's nothing stopping you testing your competitors as well. So I think a few other people have touched on this. So design tools, certain ones that I use, Photoshop, Sketch, Illustrator. I'm less about the Unity and Unreal coding. I'm a bit more old, like I create the images and then I test them separately before they even go into production. Good for certain things, not great for everything, but at least it gives you an idea of the journey itself. Testing tools, there's a variety of testing tools you can use. Obviously, various SDKs allow you to kind of get the thing up on, so you can test it from like a video testing point of view. But certain things, if you want quick testing, I would probably suggest usertesting.com. Usability Hub. There's a nice thing called Mr. Tappy, which I'll show you in a minute, and I'm not getting paid to push this at all. And focus test, and remember your script. It's like your objective. How are they going to get from A to B? Once you're live, you've got a variety of things that you can use, such as AppC, GA, Game Analytics, Swerve, which obviously will A/B test. This is Mr. Tappy. Again, not being paid to show you this. I know your SDKs can do this, but the good thing that I find with using this, if you're doing your office testing, buy one of these. They're 300 quid. They're made by a guy in New Zealand. They've got a magnet, so if you're doing mobile, you see the webcam shines down, well, focuses down on the actual iPad, and then it actually allows you to also use a webcam to record the facial expressions as well. Because the thing in testing is people will lie. They'll say, yeah, that was great. And actually, their face is telling you something completely different. So this is an example, actually. Getting rapid feedback is a must for success. do you actually need to build that prototype? Do you need to actually have Unity time, your coders doing time before it even gets there? And I'm talking probably about the HUDs or anything UI related. You can string those images together and make full prototypes with one journey. Okay, maybe different logic paths would be a bit of an issue, but you can usually find out whether your journey is correct even before you start, even before it touches code, basically. So there's 6 types of test. Your first click test is good for basically giving you a heat map, which you've just seen, on a single image. The navigation test, so that'll give you a drop-off rate. Usually it's in seconds. So, are they overloaded by that certain navigation? And you may think, you may have designers that go, well, of course my design's correct. But you don't know until you actually get it out there. So this is part of the rapid iteration. You can actually send out design questions. I know you probably already do this in terms of questionnaires, but that can actually feed into your production a lot earlier so that you're actually getting that feedback and designing and building for what the market actually wants. And then obviously you can A/B test, and a 5-second test. For me, that's probably the most useful as a UX designer. You basically put a piece of paper up on the wall, cover it up, and then ask a user to basically tell you what they remember after seeing it for 5 seconds. So it gives you an idea of information hierarchy. Are they being overloaded? So basically onto the tutorial, part of the analysis. So your day 1 drop-off for any game, these are the kind of figures being bounded around by your various industry people, is about 30%. Your day 7 drop-off is between 7 and 10. Quite a lot of people will say it's 10%. I have seen it at about 7. And your completion rate is about 30%. That's 30% drop-off, sorry, on your first-time tutorial. So on that, I basically did a bit of research myself. So I kicked out a load of questionnaires, spent a bit of money on actually asking, how long do you spend reading a tutorial? 46% were below 30 seconds, 38% were 31 to 2 minutes. I reckon in hindsight, I could have probably distilled that down even more and had 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes. And then basically everyone else is like 4 minutes plus, and there were some passes. So what was the main reason for skipping a tutorial? Slightly loaded question, but we already know that a load of people don't read them. Boredom. Tutorials don't really get to the point enough, and basically they're not giving you the basic information that they need, or they're not intuitive. So again, what frustrates you most about tutorials? Basically, delays gameplay, feels restricted. There's too much information or information overload. If it's too long, or this is my favorite, I've played Streets of Rage over 100 times, I know what I'm doing. So basically, they're fine with it. So in essence, from your tutorial, we found that asking those questions, which took 10 minutes and cost me something like $20, we know that we want to chunk information. Because they don't read anything, you need to use animated actions. Introduce action reward, reinforce the learnings, and then only teach what they want you to see basically on that certain day. So if we're going to look at the HUD, I've got 2 games here. There's a core or / mid-core game, and then there's a casual game. As you can see, I've done a little bit of a first click test. All I've done is ask them where they would need to click or tap to get to the next thing. I do know that they haven't been as subjected to the tutorial, but we've also determined that people don't necessarily read tutorials. So if we look at the first one, the top, we have all of our score, currency, and store items, news and timed offers along the top. And along the bottom, we have stuff that is actions, which is, it's quite easy, but it's basically stuff you need to use next to your thumb, basically. So when we asked them, did they know what to do next, got some responses such as too small on an iPhone, don't know what's going on. Yes, there's about 54% did know what to do, even though they weren't shoved through a tutorial. And yeah, some of them were like, that's a punctuation mark, that's urgent. So if we look at the casual game, obviously it's portrait, slightly different. Again, it follows very much the same rules, but they've tabbed stuff, and the action's obviously in the center of the screen. All of your kind of head-up display information is at the top, so you know your score and everything else. When we asked them, did you know what to do? Yes. Do next. It was really difficult. Difficult to understand. Yes, I tapped on the teardrop, and then you have some random feedback, such as the faces of people are uninvited, and the tabs at the bottom of the screen don't show their purpose. So, which one did better? If we're looking at time, in terms of are they overloaded as a user? Are they actually wondering, working out what to do? Then actually it was Game A that did a lot better than Game B, which is very strange, because you'd think that the core game would have a slightly longer time for people to work out what was going on. But Game A labeled its buttons, Game B didn't. There's a multiple amount of things that could go wrong there, but that's basically why the time was a lot less. If we're going to look at the store, we're going to look at basically the standard things to do on the store. If we're going for a freemium game, basically you've got your special offers on kind of your left-hand side. Always make sure you're selling your offers as much as possible. And they usually have a second IAP with a label on bestseller. That's usually actually the one that sells probably most units, and it's usually mid-tier. Tab where you need to, and just make sure all of these are basically your shelves, so make sure you are kind of using them as a shelf, as it were. Again, you can surface your special offers and timed offers, usually on day one, with like you buy it now, but it's actually a modal, so the user can kind of get rid of it. And then, as we've attained on the HUD, you can surface your special offers in the right-hand side of the screen. If it's landscape, if it's portrait, it's usually roughly the same place, but portrait. Also, look at displaying these in time. So time is important. You don't have to show everything at the same time. So think of it in day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or 7, or all the way up to your first month. You can push people with push notifications back to those timed offers. So I've got basically an example showing day 1, 3, and 5. So your analysis for the store is basically make sure there's no friction from the HUD. Special offers surfaces them in timed, and then reinforce your offers in the game loop, and tab if you need to. Finally, as a little add-in, make sure your game is responsive. 400 milliseconds is baseline from the Doherty rule. If you've got a spinner, make sure you put the percentage in. There's nothing worse than a spinner going around. If the user doesn't know how long it's going to take for that thing to load. And if there's multiple things to load on the bar, then make sure you're kind of showing them what's actually loading beneath the bar. So we've covered, to answer the question, testing your prototypes will pay dividends, even the really quick testing. Again, you've got to know why you're testing and what you're testing, but just test and bring it to the forefront of your production. Systems need to be quick to load, and then HUDs need to not overload the user, label and tab where possible, and stores need to be surfaced easily. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cool stuff. We can get a couple of questions in if we can. Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously a massive fan of making sure UX is right and simplicity, and the fact you're talking about testing it. I mean, it's a luxury we don't often have.
Exactly, yeah.
And I love your Mr. Tappy. That's great. It reminds me, though, of, because the fun of games we had with Sony when we had people coming into our lab to test PlayStation Home, the biggest thing is, don't let yourself do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I used to tell people what was going on. It was like, bad idea.
Yeah.
Bad idea. So anyone got any quick questions? Oh, we got a question right there.
Thank you. I've got a question about the heat maps. So these screenshots, they were made from Mr. Tappy or some other tools?
No, that was actually usertesting.com. So you can buy in users from that, shove the screenshot up, and then ask the question, and then it'll basically give you a heat map of where they're clicked. So that was the actual first click test. So that if you use usertesting.com, again, I'm not being paid to tell you about that, but it's a really quick tool for you to get really quick feedback, and it costs dollars, you know. Demographic, you know, if you're choosing different demographics, that's where it gets expensive. But if you just stick into standard demographics, it's pence.
Because there are a couple of sites, aren't there, that do different levels of testing. But I think it's worth paying attention to what they're actually good for, rather than trying to make them solve problems they can't do.
Exactly. Yeah. So you'd use them just to basically work out that you're on the right track.
Yeah, and I think an interesting one is, because you can go up to the level of someone like player research, where you've got a dedicated teams that are doing biometrics and all that kind of stuff, or you can just do simple, I will check what they actually do by data, not what they tell me they're going to do.
Exactly, but that all costs loads of money, doesn't it?
It can do. It depends on how it's done. So one last quick question.
Another question.
Oh, sorry, yeah?
Sorry, can I continue?
Go for it, yeah.
Sorry.
So again, about the heat maps, did you ever try to integrate some heat map tools inside your games, like to get up-to-date data about missteps of the players for the new feature or something like that?
So something like AppSy, I've kind of used that before. I think I was thinking that would be after the horse has bolted. Do you know what I mean? I kind of want to test it really early on, if you can, before you even release it. But that's what I've used before, is AppSy, and that kind of does the same thing, actually in a lot more detail. So you can actually track the flow all the way through, see if the user converts on the store after X game loop and all the rest of it.
That's the stuff that I love, though, because when you get data analytics, it shows, if you get your data design right in terms of what you're capturing, you can capture, their activity and filter and tap that all the way to the fairly fine level of detail.
Yeah.
And then mapping that against heat maps, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And improve it as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. My favourite one was Killzone 3, when that was first being tested back in Sony Studios. It was the first time I ever saw a first-person shooter mapped as a heat map. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is good.
Anyway, on that note, we have one quick question here, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Could you just go over again how you set up the surveys for the two tutorials?
How? Just go over
the
it.
Process, yeah.
It's basically, I basically wanted to get across. So obviously there's a big industry kind of paper that says, people don't play tutorials. So obviously I was kind of coming at it from, I want to ask people exactly, whether they do complete them or not, because I want to use my own data in front of you to show you how to do it, kind of thing. So really all I did was I kind of worked out, so I kind of, the first question is obviously how long. So then that kind of leads you into, you can be more loaded the further down the line you get. Because if you suddenly, if your first question is loaded, it affects the whole other question process. So start with your kind of your number metrics, i.e. how long, or like a more of a logical way of asking something, and then you can kind of tease it out, basically. Does that answer it? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the number of games that are killed by their tutorials either being too long or not long enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.